No one anticipated this. Lil Scrappy was barely hanging on a few days ago, his health rapidly declining as his family and doctors braced themselves for the worst. Even Scrappy's closest friends were afraid that this might be the end for the Atlanta rap legend, and fans were devastated. The hip-hop community held its breath. Now, though, in a startling turn of events, Scrappy is exhibiting symptoms of a miraculous recovery that even the most renowned medical professionals find incomprehensible. Now, doctors who had made bleak predictions are in disbelief. According to one hospital insider, "We've never seen anything like this." Family members are left in shock after anticipating the worst. Mommy D, she believes that God is intervening in this situation. Bambi, after almost losing him, she's still processing the emotional roller coaster. And admirers, they are frantically trying to find out what transpired in that hospital room. When Scrappy opened his eyes at last, what did he say? Most importantly, is this merely a brief miracle before another disastrous turn? Or is this the beginning of his journey back to full health? This story is far from over, so stay tuned. The hospital was so tense that a knife could easily pierce it. Lil Scrappy was lying still in his hospital bed a few days ago, hooked up to machines, his condition getting worse every hour. The family had already been warned by doctors to expect the worst. The once vigorous rapper, who was renowned for his unadulterated energy and commanding presence, was now battling for his life, and it didn't seem like he would prevail. Mother D had been distraught. Since Scrappy's admission, she had remained inside the hospital, pacing the corridors, muttering prayers to herself, and blaming everyone and everything for the situation. This shouldn't have occurred. Just one day before, she had screamed in frustration, "My son is a fighter, and I refuse to believe he's not going to pull through." Scrappy's estranged wife, Bambi, reacted in a more nuanced way. Even though she still had feelings for Scrappy, their tumultuous relationship made things challenging. Some whispered that she hadn't even wanted to visit the hospital, but that her family and friends had pushed her to go. Nevertheless, something inside her broke when she saw Scrappy in that hospital bed, so exposed, regardless of any previous drama. According to reports, she said to close friends, "I don't care what we faced. All I want is for him to be all right." Then the unimaginable occurred. The smallest movement, barely perceptible at first, was the beginning. Although one of the nurses believed she saw Scrappy's fingers twitch, she brushed it off as a reflex. Then it occurred once more. She wasn't the only one who noticed this time either. "Did you notice that?" To another nurse, one whispered. Scrappy's eyes briefly fluttered before they could even comprehend what was happening. But then again, and then his eyes opened in a moment that shook the whole room around. As the nurses hurried to his bedside and summoned the doctors, the beeps of the machines filled the quiet. They were waking up the man they had virtually given up on. Mama D, who had been sitting with her head in her hands in the room's corner, looked up and let out a gasp. Difficult. As though she were scared to hope, her voice was hardly audible above a whisper. Scrappy's mouth opened, but initially nothing came out. His face was filled with confusion as his eyes darted around the room. As they rushed in, the doctors asked him questions and checked his vitals. Were they audible to him? Was he aware of his location? But he spoke first, in a clear but weak voice, before anyone else could say another word. "Mom." It only took that one word. Mama D sobbed and ran to his side, holding his hand tightly as though she was worried he would run away again. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so terrified of you," she sobbed. Bambi had been standing motionless close to the doorway, her face wet with tears. For the first time in her life, she was unable to express what she wanted to say. Meanwhile, the doctors were taken aback. This was not intended to occur. The body of Scrappy had been shutting down. They had already started to get ready for the possibility that he would never come to. However, he was conscious, awake, and yelling for his mother. Among the physicians, Dr. Reynolds gave a disbelieving shake of his head. He muttered, "This is incredible," as he glanced at the monitors that displayed steady, no, improving, vitals. "We must conduct tests, but this isn't something we see on a daily basis." News of the hospital was already beginning to circulate outside the room. Word spread quickly after a nurse, unable to control her excitement, texted a friend. Little Scrappy was starting to stir. When they heard the news, the fans who had been praying and holding signs outside the hospital burst into cheers. Posts began to appear on social media immediately. "Hey everyone, Scrappy just woke up. What a miracle!" Prayers were answered. "Scrappy has returned. I urgently need an update. Is he speaking? Is he all right?" Tell us something, please. However, conditions in the hospital room remained precarious. Yes, Scrappy was conscious, but he was feeble. His muscles were uncooperative when he attempted to move. He scanned his surroundings, attempting to piece together what had transpired. "Where am I?" He was able to say it at last. Mama D brushed his hair back and said softly, "You're in the hospital, baby. You'll be all right, even though you've been really sick." Scrappy turned his attention to Bambi, and for a brief instant, they were silent. They experienced a range of complex emotions together, including regret, love, hurt, and relief. At last, he forced a faint, weary smile. "I didn't anticipate seeing you here." Bambi chuckled unsteadily. "Yes, well, I couldn't avoid it." Even though the moment was impactful, a lot of questions remained. The world was watching, waiting to find out if this was truly a miracle. The family had to process everything, and the doctors needed to perform tests. Or might there have been another twist in the works? The whole atmosphere in the hospital changed when Lil Scrappy opened his eyes. No one knew what this meant for Scrappy's long-term health, but it seemed to ease the tension that had been looming like a black cloud, albeit only a little. Was this a brief glimmer of hope before another disastrous turn, or was this the start of a real recovery? The doctors didn't waste any time. In a matter of minutes, the medical staff was conducting tests, evaluating Scrappy's cognitive abilities, tracking his vitals, and testing his reflexes. The room was bustling with activity, with doctors whispering to one another and nurses adjusting machines, their faces displaying a mix of wonder and uncertainty. The lead doctor, Reynolds, was standing at the foot of Scrappy's bed, studying the data on the monitors with a frown on his face. In the end, he muttered, shaking his head, "This doesn't make sense." Mama D raised her head, still holding onto her son's hand. "You mean that it doesn't make sense? My infant is awake. Don't you think that's a blessing?" Dr. Reynolds paused. He couldn't deny what he was seeing, but he knew better than to give false hope. Mrs. D, he was in critical condition just 24 hours ago. His body wasn't reacting to treatment as we had hoped, and his organs were exhibiting symptoms of shutting down. This degree of recovery, at least not this quickly, was not what we had anticipated. Still frail but vigilant, Scrappy managed a tiny smile. After being unconscious for days, he rasped, "You know I'm full of surprises." His voice was hoarse and dry. After remaining silent since Scrappy first woke up, Bambi finally spoke up. She paused, then spoke in a gentle, cautious tone. "Scrap, can you recall what took place?" Scrappy's eyes wavered in perplexity. He let out a slow exhale, obviously trying to remember what had brought him to this point. "I wasn't feeling well when I last remember. I felt sick and lightheaded." He paused, trying to force himself to see through the mental haze, his face tensing. "I'm here the next thing I know." There was silence in the room. Mama D tightened her hold on his hand. Something unsaid filled Bambi's eyes. Guilt, perhaps. Scrappy took note. Despite his weakness, he was not blind. He fixed his gaze on Bambi's. "You're aware of something I'm not." Bambi paused once more, but Dr. Reynolds interrupted her before she could respond. "We shouldn't put too much pressure on him just yet. The fact that he is conscious and that his vitals are stable is what matters. There is still a long way to go." However, the tension was already there. There was more to the story than what he was being told, and Scrappy sensed it. The news media had fully reported on Scrappy's miraculous awakening outside the hospital room. With cameras flashing and microphones thrust into the faces of anyone who appeared to have information, reporters crowded the entrance. Ament. A small Scrappy Airisias. A real Miraceli. When Lil Scrappy defies the odds, fans rejoice. What's next for the star? Experts comment on the rapper's startling recovery. There was a frenzy on social media. Scrappy should release an album about the entire experience if he survives this. The doctors didn't count him out, and now he's awake. God is good. This doesn't feel quite right. Heste, we need details. There were a lot of different theories. A few admirers thought Scrappy had been misdiagnosed from the beginning. Some conjectured that a higher power had stepped in. There were also those who thought that the story was far from finished and that there was still more to it than meets the eye. Mama D wasn't having any of it in the hospital. Convinced that Scrappy would quickly recover, she was already organizing his homecoming. She stroked his hair and said, "We're going to get you out of here soon, baby. As I always have, I will take care of you." Despite his gratitude, Scrappy didn't think it was that easy. There were too many unanswered questions in his mind. The unspoken tension between them increased as his gaze returned to Bambi. "What are you withholding from me?" Despite his hoarse voice, there was no denying the gravity in his tone. Bambi took a deep breath. She glanced at Scrappy and then back at Mama D. She parted her lips, then shut them again. She sighed at last, after what seemed like an eternity. "Oh no, I didn't think you would make it." "We didn't." Scrappy remained unflinching. "Yes, and some things happened," Bambi added, her voice hardly audible above a whisper. "Things you are unaware of." Mama D's eyes grew wide. "What are you talking about, girl?" Bambi paused, obviously conflicted. Perhaps this isn't the right moment. Scrappy's heart rate monitor began to beat more frequently. He was getting frustrated, even though he was weak. "No, I have a right to know the truth if I struggled to recover from whatever happened to me. So get on the phone." The silence that ensued was oppressive. However, a knock on the door cut off Bambi before she could reveal whatever secret she was keeping. A nervous-looking nurse peered in. "I apologize for disturbing you, but someone is here requesting to see him." Mama D scowled. "Who?" The nurse paused before responding. "His dad." Scrappy's whole body tensed. His dad? The man who had spent the majority of his life away from home. The man who had only been around for brief periods of time. Mama D's protective instincts kicked in and she shook her head instantly. "Oh no. He is not required to be present." Bambi, however, appeared conflicted. "Scrap, perhaps you ought to listen to him." Scrappy simply gazed at them, both while his thoughts were racing. When he first awakens, he discovers that his recuperation is a medical mystery, something that Bambi is keeping from him now. Furthermore, the father who was never truly present wanted to get involved all of a sudden. This recovery wasn't merely a miracle, the beginning of something much, much larger. The world seemed to be eagerly awaiting the next chapter in this story as word of Lil Scrappy's incredible recovery spread like wildfire. Although Scrappy's road to recovery was not going to be straightforward, it was evident that his recovery was nearly miraculous. He had overcome the odds, even though the prognosis was dire. The question that hung over everyone's minds as he lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by his loved ones and the soft hum of machines, was what would happen to him next. However, the past was resurfacing before the future could be fully addressed. As she observed her son's precarious condition, Scrappy's mother, Mama D, was overcome with a range of emotions. She felt a surge of hurt and rage. The years of animosity and the conflicts waged in private and in public were still very much present. Regardless of his maturity, Scrappy would always be the child she battled for because he had always been her baby. But Scrappy was fighting an emotional battle in addition to a physical one. Scrappy had never had a good relationship with his father, Daryl Richardson Sr. There was a profound void left by Daryl's absence for the majority of Scrappy's life. Scrappy was resentful and reluctant to make amends because of the years of disregard, unfulfilled promises, and unsaid words. But everything seemed to change when faced with the scariest moments in life. Even though it wasn't simple, Scrappy knew he had to reconcile his past. At that point, Daryl arrived. One could feel the tension in the room. Years had passed since Daryl had even made an attempt to get in touch, and now, in the middle of Scrappy's medical emergency, he found himself standing at the door, unsure of how to handle this delicate situation. Scrappy felt mixed emotions tighten in his chest: anger, perplexity, and another thing. Is it forgiveness? As he spoke, Daryl's voice broke. "I'm sorry, son, but I'm not sure how to put it. I've been a lousy dad. I am aware that I failed to support you when you needed me. I ought to have been. However, I never thought that I would finally realize how much I had messed up until something like this happened." As Scrappy lay there, the weight of his past crashing into his present, his hands clenched into fists. A tiny part of him was beginning to soften, but he could still feel the anger rising inside of him. Never one to keep quiet, Mama D was the first to speak. "Daryl, you can't just walk in here and pretend that you can go back in time and undo all the years you missed. You want to show up just because he's in a hospital bed, even though you weren't there when he needed you." With a mix of annoyance and fatigue, Scrappy's gaze shifted between his father and mother. He simply could not stand it any longer. There was too much tension. "Enough, Ma. I've had enough of hearing this. I'm just worn out from years of fighting with you. Even if it means listening to him, I want peace while I'm still here." Mama D's face contorted as her rage gave way to grief. "What do you see, Scrappy? He is not worthy of your pardon." After all these years of his disregard for you and his broken promises. Scrappy looked over at his mom. "Ma, I no longer need you to stand up for me. I've harbored this rage for far too long. My time to let go is now. I need to get over this." Daryl watched the conversation in silence. He had nothing to defend himself against, nothing to say to undo the harm he had caused. He just nodded, regret weighing heavily on his heart. And just when it looked like everything was about to blow up, something unexpected occurred. The hospital room door opened again, and a nurse entered with urgent news. "We recently received the results of your most recent tests, Lil Scrappy. Although the doctors stated that you were improving, this is more than we anticipated." Scrappy's heartbeat accelerated as his eyes narrowed in interest. "What did she say? Did this actually occur?" The nurse went on in a steady but awe-filled voice. "We've noticed a significant improvement in your health. The organs that only a few days ago were failing, they're operating normally now. We were concerned about your brain activity, but it is steady. Furthermore, there are no indications of any long-term harm. To be honest, this recovery is absolutely amazing." Nobody said anything for a while. Disbelief pervaded the room, as though everyone was still processing what they had just heard. Scrappy blinked multiple times as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. "So, I'm going to be all right." The nurse grinned. "Not just all right, you're going to recover completely. Results like this were not what we had anticipated, especially not so rapidly. We have never seen anything like your progress." A mix of tears and applause filled the room. Bambi was so happy that she gave Scrappy a tight hug. With tears welling up in her eyes, Mama D covered her mouth. Daryl appeared to breathe a sigh of relief as well. Eyes meeting everyone in the room, Scrappy scanned the space. "So this is real? Really? I'll be all right?" Dr. Reynolds, who had been listening to the discussion in silence, finally said something. "This recovery is unheard of, Scrappy. It has no known medical explanation. We're not sure how your body is healing so quickly, but we're not doubting it. It's a miracle." Bambi wiped away the tears that were streaming down her face as she tried to gather her thoughts. "Scrappy, this is really a blessing. Life will give you another chance. We have another opportunity as a family." There was one unanswered question, though, even as Scrappy reveled in his recovery. His relationship with his father was the only thing that was still up in the air. In many respects, Daryl remained an outsider even after he apologized. Scrappy had the chance to recover physically, but would it be as simple to mend his relationship with his father? With a quiet but determined voice, Scrappy turned to face his father. "Daryl, you're correct about one thing. This is another opportunity. For all of us, not just myself. Second chances are difficult, though. They also have their own set of difficulties." With a tear falling from his eye, Daryl nodded. "I understand. To put things right, I'm prepared to go to any lengths. I don't count on your immediate forgiveness. However, I'm hoping you'll realize eventually that I want to be here for you right now." With the burden of the moment still pressing down on his chest, Scrappy inhaled deeply. "I'm willing to try, but I can't guarantee that everything will change right away. For us both." Though emotionally charged, the ensuing silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that marked a new chapter, a new beginning. And Scrappy experienced hope for the first time in years, the hope that perhaps, just possibly, things might be different now. He was aware that this journey was far from over as he lay there, sleeping in his hospital bed. However, the agony, hardships, and heartbreak of the past seemed less intense. He was still alive. Above all, he had his friends and family and a second chance at life. Even though the path ahead would be lengthy and challenging, he wasn't traveling it alone. The world would be watching, and Scrappy was certain that the journey ahead would be worthwhile. As Scrappy continues his recuperation, we can only speculate about what the future holds for him. Will he make amends with his father and his family in full? Will he face new difficulties, or will his health keep getting better? Above all, how will his loved ones and supporters respond as he moves forward with his incredible comeback? The answers are not yet known. One thing is certain, though, we are all invested in Lil Scrappy's story, and it is far from over. It's evident that his life has been full of drama and unexpected turns, from the shock of his critical condition to this unexpected recovery. We'd like to hear from you now. Do you believe Scrappy can truly put the past behind him and create a better future for himself and his family? Is there more to this story than meets the eye? Or do you think his recovery was a miracle? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, like this video, and subscribe for more updates if you're as engrossed in Lil Scrappy's journey as we are. That way, you won't miss a single detail of this amazing tale. This is only the beginning, so stay tuned.